Okay, so this is a slightly different session in that it's an overarching topic, so I'm not sharing a particular case study. And it's very close to my heart because of the work I do. So I'm very quickly Swiss, Hong Kong, Chinese, and originally a lawyer, moved around, and I've been running my business since about 20 years, coaching and leadership development. And sustainability has always been very close to my heart. I've been working with Logosynthesis since 2008, and it's become one of my favorite approaches to work with. So the key messages I've got today are four. I think there's a lot of good news out there. There's a big trend, if you will, in leadership in organizations, which is going in, I'd say, the right direction. And I'll share what I think, what I mean by that in a moment. But there's also a point where things get stuck. I believe, and I really I have a conviction that actually logosynthesis can offer a solution which takes us beyond where we, the stuckness, and actually have a significant impact. And I think we need to gain more traction. When I say I mean the community, but even beyond, it's all of us who are on this journey together to create more awareness, and where logosynthesis is concerned, to create more opportunities for first-hand experiencing of logosynthesis, and we simply need more practitioners across the world. I think there are many of us on this quest, and I believe the sense of urgency has actually only increased. So I've divided this into the individual and systemic because I believe in the multi-pronged approach. I think we need both. On the leadership individual level, there are these big words that are out there. The intention is not to go into this, into these individual words per se. For me, everything is actually very interconnected. These are words that have been there for some time, and they're noble concepts, and we get stuck somewhere along the way. In terms of the systemic, the trends I'm seeing and the initiatives I'm seeing are also beautiful and noble. They're, the inclusion, the diversity, some have been around for a long time. There's the mindfulness wave, the mental health, resilience, self-organization. These are words that I'm guessing you're here because these say something to you, and you're also on this journey, and or perhaps just interested in finding out more about what this means. And the reasons I see optimism is because a lot of the leadership programs, so I design and deliver leadership programs, and what I'm seeing, not only in my work, obviously, but what I'm hearing from colleagues, is there's more and more focus on the self-awareness and self-development. So it's not just in inverted commas, the classical, so to speak, skills building or competences. It's going more and more into the self-discovery part, which is fantastic. There's more literature and research which support this. I'm somebody who more of a practitioner, so I'm not much of a theorist, much as I love reading. So it's great to see literature which backs up what I experience, but what I think many of us know intuitively. There's a trend of assessment tools in coaching schools which are dovetailing as well towards this and becoming more mainstream. So one example is the leadership circle, which is, going from the reactive to the creative, right? There's a simple fatigue that's increasing with the old ways, the push away from hierarchical thinking. There's a fatigue with toxic cultures, which is more of the systemic. And there's an increasing role modeling from senior leadership, also in sharing their stories, even on social media. There we go. And then there's been a movement. This is not all new, right? We stand on the shoulders of a lot of people from, advocates from the past, to whom I'm very grateful, including, fantastic women, given, we look at the gender, but also climate change. We look at the younger, generation. So there are a lot of advocates out there, and we wouldn't be here without them. One of the key pieces of literature, not only obviously, but one of them where the self-management or teal movement is concerned, has been Frederick Laloux's Reinventing Organizations, and this whole idea of organizations as living systems. There's a generational push, and simply what's happening in the world, the increasing awareness around mental health because of COVID, because of the Harry and Meghan. There's the Black Lives Matter movement this in the last year especially. There's the Me Too. And so with social media can work for us. It obviously can work against us, but it also can work for us. Money speaks. There's more and more quantifiable data in organizations around the cost of mental health. And there's increasing organizational initiatives I do see around mental health, in particular, resilience, and the agility movements, and role model organizations such as the B Corp or the Patagonias of the world. So we see all of that. So that's the positives. Now, where we get stuck is the typical issue of mindset change, which all of us know is just not that easy. Letting go is not a cognitive process. It's one thing to be aware, but letting go really is something that sits somewhere else. And this is where logosynthesis comes in, obviously. When there's a mindset change required of leadership and letting go, there's a fear of loss of control and power, which we all have anyway. And when we work with people who really worked hard to get to the top, letting go is just not just a scary thing, but it's just simply difficult. So it's very understandable. The commitment has started and there's awareness, but it gets around self-work in particular. It's there, but then it stops at a certain point. There's the tools. An example I've used in the past is immunity to change, which is great to get started. But again, what happens is it stays at the cognitive oftentimes, and it nearly requires a form of mental gymnastics, which gets very tiring. And so it means that sometimes it's really hard work for both the coach and the client, who both get stuck together. And there's still not enough research, and there's still not enough role modeling. That's the thing I'm saying. Now, in terms of the systemic, even more so in terms of shift in paradigm thinking, right? It takes even more time. It really requires a mindset change. And what happens is there's a tendency still to be, to have too much lip service. There's structures and processes in place that are still too rigid and too hard to break. One naturally really needs to go beyond addressing the symptoms. So much as resilience is a beautiful initiative, we actually need to do more than that. If you think about the definition of success and the incentives, it's still ingrained in old patterns. We still hang on to hierarchies. We still hang on to status. So again, there's that fear. So all of it, and a lot of it boils back down to leadership and individuals. So examples where logosynthesis is at work, and this is where obviously the other presentations are a lot more about, and these are just some examples which I'll braze through, is for example, burnout. And ideally one would address it before it happens. It doesn't unfortunately happen that often, but ideally when you do, it helps people who are highly ambitious understand why they're so driven. People under stress, obviously not only then, but we are more easily triggered. And when we're talking about organizations, leaders who act out because they're stressed or not, they create a culture of toxicity, fear, lack of safety. The imposter syndrome or perfectionism often leads to micromanagement. So what happens when we work using logosynthesis is we're able to address this at a different level, and this really begins to impact, and you can see obvious shifts, especially if you're doing 360s. You get feedback that things actually visibly change in behavior. On a systemic level, constant pressure we're all under creates stress, creates anxiety, and this leads to more mental and physical health issues. The gender and the bias, the conversation there, where does it come from? If people are like that, there's a reason for it. Usually it's a personal history, there's culture, and the great thing with logosynthesis is that we can work with the socioenergetic fields. As I mentioned before, resilience, the initiative, is fantastic as a short-term solution, but without going below the surface, it can just become a coping mechanism and only take us that far and potentially backlash. So the proverbial iceberg, I love this model. I'm not going to explain it here. My assumption is you're all familiar with it, because this is where logosynthesis comes in and where it excels. The drivers are primarily of all our behavior are below the waterline. And this is where this so-called sticky stuff is. Our history, most of it is unconscious. So they're deeply, hardcore, deeply ingrained. We take as beliefs, we take as truths, the patterns, the expectations, our dreams, everything that drives us is actually really below the waterline. And so it's harder to get to. And as coaches, we don't dig. That's not our job, right? But they surface when we start to use logosynthesis, and I'll come back to that in a second. This is where logosynthesis excels because it's simple, it's elegant, it's quick, we don't dwell, and it goes beyond the cognitive because we work with energy, we work with words. It trains us as coaches to really listen, and the more we do logosynthesis, the more we get in tune with ourselves and come closer to essence and become even better at what we do. That's one of the things I absolutely love about working with logosynthesis. Whenever I come out of a session, I feel so good and I'm not tired. And so it's this, a spiraling up effect. So how I see logosynthesis as a potential solution and impact is it equips coaches we all have this tool belt. I don't know any coach who only has done one training, but we try to find all sorts of, we keep adding to the toolbox. It's a fantastic, and I would go beyond the word tool, but it really just equips coaches to go beyond the classical, to go to places which might otherwise feel sticky without acting or becoming a therapist. Because it's always that fine line of therapy versus coaching. I'm a coach, but I also know, and I don't think I'm going out on a limb here, coaching can have a therapeutic effect. And I can for certain say that logosynthesis has had a therapeutic effect to the point where people have said, this is better than therapy. But you have to have done your homework in order to be able to take people to places. That is absolutely essential, and that's part of the training in logosynthesis. It improves our ability to hold space as a coach. I've mentioned this before, whether in practicing mindfulness or meditation, I do that. And it only takes me that far as well. So I don't see this as a one solution fits all. It's parallel to other ways of being centered. I think there's so much potential in introducing, practitioners trained in logosynthesis to coaching faculties within organizations or pools. And I would, if this were added on as an add-on to leadership development programs or coaching, it would be so much more beneficial than letting the program stop where they do. So I really do hope that at some point we get there. The other possibility on a systemic level is, in addition to mindfulness training, for example, or resilience training or diversity training, is actually training employees in self-coaching. The emotional intelligence model you might be familiar with, we talk about self-awareness, and then there's this self-management, self-regulation part. This is where we get most stuck, I think, and I think logosynthesis equips us so much better to do that. And so, training people with self-coaching and then equipping more internal coaches in HR to confidently address issues within the organization with visible results without, again, once again, being seen as therapists. We all have our own styles. And I think that with, the demonstrations we saw earlier on, it's, you can see that style is different between Astrid and Heather, and everybody has their own style. So of course, if you are a therapist, then you can go deeper. But as a coach, you can, depending on your preference, because this is not always everybody's cup of tea, but it allows you to bring in your entire portfolio. The other thing is, what I think is enormously important is to begin with leadership, as always. Because there's the role modeling that's important, the shift begins there, and the impact begins there on the cultures, and then the initiatives, whether it's a resilience, whether it's self-organization or agility or whatever, they're more likely to succeed, but it has to begin. I don't like to use the word top, and I actually try to avoid the word leaders, because for me it's about people in leadership positions. That's another story in itself. this was really, as you can imagine, this was a short of all my findings, very biased from my own observations, but also from conversations with my colleagues who are, on a similar journey, which is why I'm offering this mini workshop on February 4th, because I really would love to explore, to discuss, to brainstorm, what can we do more of? And this model on the right is something that I've drawn up and I use as a base because I think it really does begin. I think it speaks for itself. It's really self-explanatory, not something I'm going to go into here now, but something I would share on the workshop. Is it all begins with self, begins with connection, but there's something so much bigger than us in terms of consciousness and oneness. So that's my presentation. The last slide is really just to I'll say this now, and I still open up for conversation. Thank you for joining me today. I think there's so many of us, whether you're in the community or not in the community, whether you're even familiar with logosynthesis or whether you choose not to continue. I think we're still on this similar quest, and it's so important that we all work together with our uniqueness because we're all so needed. And as I was saying to the other group, it's not just now, we were needed yesterday, and we're definitely needed tomorrow. So I'm going to end the slideshow here and open up for the conversation for, I see there's a few more faces who've joined us in the meantime.
Hi, Pam. I loved your picture, and I think it's very inspiring that you take it to organizations and more on a community level. So what I was wondering about, if you work in a coaching with an organization or a business, and you want to enhance the colleague interconnections and prevent conflicts and stuff like that, how would you introduce logosynthesis to a group like that? Would you do like a kind of the introduction for self-coaching workshop idea? Yeah. Would you take them through group processes with joint problems? Or I was like curious how you would do that.
Yeah. So one-on-ones are obvious. So if there is a particular conflict or someone who is open to working one-on-one, that's obviously one way. I have yet to succeed in bringing self-coaching as a team building not so much a team building exercise. I got so close to it last year, and then there was a budget issue, but there was also a slight, this is going to get too personal, even though the team was very, very cohesive based on it was intended as a follow-through. So my learning from that was my positioning of it. I think they were concerned that it would get too personal for them. And in fact, in the self-coaching, there's no demo, people work for themselves. That's really important. So that's my learning going forward, and that is my intention going forward. And that's why I would make it what I call a self-coaching plus program, because it's connected to other models which are useful, and then to dock onto that, because you need to kind of prepare people for it as well. But I would certainly, I don't know if that answers your question. I wouldn't do, especially with functioning teams, I wouldn't do group processes. It gets too personal. It's I don't even think it's the way we want to go, because I don't know that that's necessary at this point. Maybe one day, who knows? But I think we're too soon for that kind of thing.
Yeah, and it reminds us of the step 1 in logosynthesis: build a coherent relationship. Yeah. And for those programs that might be needing more time. Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you for the question. Yeah.
And do you use the same word like logosynthesis, or do you call it like some fancy word that they understand in the business world?
No, I just call it logosynthesis. I actually find I don't even introduce logosynthesis very much in the one-on-one work I do, in terms of sometimes it helps to explain how it works and where it comes from, and sometimes people don't care as long as it works. A client recently called it brain hoovering. it's vacuum cleaning, right? For those who don't know the word hoovering. But no, I just call it logosynthesis. But it was quite fascinating when I thought it was a beautiful way of putting it. Yeah.
It's amazing to see very briefly what you did amazingly in terms of the shift. What could happen? Where are the key cornerstone, or where things could go in a different way? And that it's really insightful, because there's a lot that effectively could just be done, and many things could be explored from there.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Thanks.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, I do see so much potential. I think for me, I don't believe in competition. I really believe in collaboration. And we all have a toolkit. I don't think any one of us is trained in just one method. I think most of us have trained in several, and it just complements, so we can pull out of the toolbox. And I just believe this gives us this additional edge, because that's what it's done for me.
Pamela, how
Yes.
do you stir up interest from the organizations? How do you get your foot in the door at the beginning?
Well, it's a great question, because I'm still at it, obviously. That's actually one of the reasons I put this topic on the table, because I don't think there's enough awareness of it. So through my clients, of course, the one-on-one clients, and hoping that they pass on the message. But until somebody's actually experienced logosynthesis, I think it's extremely difficult. That's why I offer the Q&As. I think there's so many of us already in the community, but outside, who are interested. But I think it is about bringing it there and offering a pilot, doing stuff like that. If 3 people had shown up today, perfectly fine. I think, it's drop by drop by drop. I hope you're going to be coming to the February 4th, so that we can really continue this conversation and brainstorm, because I truly believe in what logosynthesis can do. I don't think any of us here on the screen are here for money. That's never driven me. So yeah, I'd love to continue, but I am aware that we're supposed to be inviting you to to go. Let me stop the recording.